afternoon, everybody. My name is Sandra Allan. I'm the Creative Arts Sector Lead. And joining me today is one of our senior associates and practicing teacher, Diggle-Perry. Welcome to our Assessment Reform Week, the Essentials, and today we're going to look at the subject special session focusing on GCSE Art and Design. So let's move on. A lot of you attend Curriculum Connects with me and my colleagues. What we want to do today is if you could all join Slido, that's slido.com. I know my colleagues putting details in the chat as we speak, and just go hashtag AQAart. And in there, you can ask your question, but most importantly as well is share your insight with us. That's really, really important. So we're here as part of Assessment Reform Week to talk you through everything you need to know all together in one place. Across a dedicated week, we're going to explore what these changes mean for our learners, for our subjects and our schools. And so far, you would have seen it's been such an exciting week. So far, you would have already seen on Monday that there's been a kick-off webinar looking at reform and what it generally means for you. Yesterday, you were seeing a video podcast and what reform means for your school. That was a real conversation, not that we're not a real conversation, with school leaders on what really matters now. And obviously, we're in this session now with our subject experts and talking about our wonderful art and design. And then there's lots more to come. So tomorrow will be about to support you with what good support looks like, and it's going to be available to you. And then Friday will be part of the Festival of Education, focusing on getting teachers like you involved in assessment reform with live teacher panels. So quite an exciting week. So let's move on to assessment reform. So in November, the Curriculum and Assessment Report was published. And I think I've probably said this so much since November. It's one of the best reports I've read. There's lots of things about the main changes on the right-hand side, which I will go through. So things like they have said, evolution, not revolution. We're not throwing our qualifications out of the window. We're not looking at new grading systems. So that's really good. They've talked about reducing that exam time. They've talked about financial education, really a lot of importance around that diverse and inclusive curriculum. They've talked around digital skills, RSE, but most importantly, and one of the things I loved is they talked about creativity. I keep saying I think I'm a nerd. I think it was 196 pages, and the word creativity, creative arts, art and design just comes up over and over, that broad and balanced curriculum. So what's this actually going to mean for us? Let's have a look. What's not yet confirmed is the timing of the consultations, and I'll talk you through both of these points next, and also what subjects are in what phases. So let's have a look at that. So these are key dates for you. We know that there is going to be a consultation on the national curriculum, and that final curriculum will be published in 2027. With first teach in 2028. And then, as I've mentioned, we've got these two phases. So we've got phase one, first teach 29, and we've got first assessment 2031, and phase two, first teach 2030, with first assessment in 2032. And the curriculum assessment report doesn't sort of go into a lot of detail about A-level, but we do know that the first phase, first teaching 2031, 33, which is moving on 2 years from GCSE. And what I really love here is that GCSE is done first. So when we talk about progression, we can really start looking at sort of the earlier key stages, and then, you know, we're into that GCSE and then looking at that progression. And without sort of talking lots and lots and lots, I mean, one of the things is those dates, 3 years away, we've got loads of time. We absolutely haven't. You know, consultation's going to be coming up, and I'm going to talk about those. And when they do happen, we'll be creating those specifications, creating our assessment materials, and also that wonderful wraparound support to make sure you're ready to teach in 2029. And that doesn't happen overnight. And, you know, being in this role, working with the Department for Education and Ofcom, conversations are happening now. So just very quickly looking at the regulatory landscape, we have Department for Education. I love that so many people say, why do AQA do this? Why do AQA? I think we need to sort of understand this. Department for Education, they provide that subject content. They're setting that overall education policy. What do kids need to understand? What do they need to be, what do they need to learn? What do they need to be assessed on? What needs to be prescribed and not prescribed? And then you've got Ofqual, our regulator. They regulate our exams and assessment, but they're setting things, and in you know, our real world of art and design, Ofqual set that the exam papers are externally set assignments come out on the 2nd of January. They set that we have 60-40% weighting. They set our assessment objectives. They set our 10-hour supervised time. So there's a lot there. We have JCQ that set our standards, and then you have exam boards. And we are, as soon as we have this subject content and we have those exam conditions, we are designing, we're going to be delivering our specifications, our assessment, and plus all of that wraparound support so that you're ready for that time. So yeah.
So the JCQ is completely separate to Ofqual then?
Yeah.
No, I never realised that.
Yeah, so JCQ is formed as a sort of interboard to set those, but they are the sort of four distinct.
Communication between them and Ofqual.
I think they talk. Yeah. I mean, they're all separate bodies that are delivering their sort of one's setting the standards, one's providing that sort of common standard across. Okay, consultation. Before we are already having these conversations, but before that subject content is finalised, draft documentation is going to go out for public consultation. So everything you type in Slido today, every conversation you have with me, my colleagues with AQA, I'm taking that insight, I'm sharing that. We're never going to have the perfect qualification because, you know, 3,000 teachers are never going to agree what a perfect qualification, but if we can get one as close to us what we all want, great. So we're influencing, but that subject content is going to go out. And that means everybody needs to respond. AQA, even though we've been influencing, we will still respond. If you love it, fantastic. If there's one bit in it you don't like, go on, respond. They make it really, really simple. And that's teachers, parents, students, industry, everybody will be responding. The Department for Education will consider those responses and they will publish their final version. And then Ofqual will be doing the same. So they'll be looking at those assessment requirements, the release dates, the assessment objectives. Have your say. It's really, really important. And I can assure you, you'll know when this is happening because we will let you know. And we will take you with us on this journey as we go through the whole reform phase. Okay, really, really quick poll because I really want to focus today on art and design. Right now, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you understand about assessment reform and what that can mean for you? So we could just have a very quick poll on that.
In the lowest and 5 being the most.
Yeah. So we got an interesting balance. Yeah, so we're pretty much in the middle, and that's fine. Our job, we're going to make a lot of people move along.
Okay.
As we get to the end. Thank you. I'm just going to take back controls. One of the things, anybody who knows me, technical is not always my forte. So I am just reconnecting back. So, okay, art and design. Wonderful qualification, wonderful subject. So looking at the curriculum assessment review, a lot of the other subjects, I mean, I look after all of the creative arts, a lot of the other subjects talk about, you know, we've got to change this, we've got to change that, we've got to, and I think with art and design, there are 3 real key areas that we're going to start to see change, but how do we see that change? And this is where we need you to start thinking. There's a real clarity around what we want to see is that clarity on volume, the range of coursework, what are students expected to produce, broader representation and media and teaching, and equity in access and representation. And if I'm absolutely honest, I think those are the main 3 areas that we need to address because we've got a great qualification. It's successful. Students are engaged, but I think there is a lot of burden for both teachers and students. I think there is need for broader representation. We could talk about AI for hours on end. And then you've got that sort of equity of access from all schools from across the country. So moving on, I'm going to hand over a little bit to Ali now, and please do keep typing your insights. Do you agree with what Ali's saying? You don't have to challenge. I mean, you know, put everything in there. That's great, because we are going to be working with you. So Ali, let's start off with clear, simple assessment. What does that mean for you and Art and Design? It's some key messages I've put up here, but
I think sometimes the word simple worries me a little bit, because clear, does that mean simple? Does that mean breaking things down so that you don't have choices? Or does that mean actually what we offer currently is a very open specification that give teachers that real broad opportunity to deliver courses that is relatable to their skills, their student skills, the schools, their demographic. And if we make clear and simple too clear and simple, does that make this watered down subject?
Yeah, almost taking away that sort of creativity.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Clear and simple, does that mean, you know, I think arts have not been in the forefront for a while, and I think maybe people out there, it'd be interesting to see what you think. That I think perhaps I've certainly felt over a period of time that children from primary school haven't had as stronger experience as they might have done in previous years, and therefore I feel like I've been constantly upskilling students over the last, particularly after COVID, and now that is back on the agenda, will we see the skills anyway come back up through the national curriculum, and actually art and design being more centre and fore, really.
Out of interest, sort of, you know, one of the big key messages, or the key message that came out of the curriculum assessment review, was exam boards and Ofqual need to work together about this sort of the burden, the volume of work that's being produced.
Yeah.
Do you think there's things here, and all the audience in the background, you know, do we think that we do know that a lot of this is a knock-on effect from COVID having one component, but is there things around the assessment objectives that could change, or is the weighting correct? You know, that we've got 60-40. What are your views on that area?
Well, the kind of 60-40 kind of would lead me into thinking about the component too. I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed, particularly as a teacher, but particularly a moderator, is that resilience tests in schools and more and more mocks being put in, particularly at the time where the externally set assignments, and meaning that schools are having to put their formally supervised time earlier, before Easter, and that also the fact that we have to give out centre assessed marks as well, that period of time for marking, assessing, giving to students an opportunity for them to appeal the process. It's meaning that there's a lot, we're having to move things further and further forward. And part of me thinks 60-40, maybe actually, could we move things earlier so that the paper becomes earlier? Could we have it from September, October, and make that decision? Maybe it should be 50-50. I don't know. Or then would that
interesting to see. I mean, we'll have a look, but it'd be interesting to see what people say. And also, when would you have the papers come out? If you know, if you had a choice, if I was to say to you, okay, I mean, do you need papers?
I think I would say I would feel that we do need papers, because actually then you have an equitable kind of playing field for everybody, that all those students get the same theme and the same way of, you know, you could have a school that's had a lot of staffing issues and there's nobody there, and who's going to launch that? What kind of what kind of projects would they give them? So I would be a bit kind of nervous about getting rid of that
Sort of, having that guidance. Yeah. I mean, the 10 hours, the preparatory time and the 10 hours, you know, we don't, I mean, I would probably cry if that became a written exam, you know, but that's my own personal opinion. And again, who would be in favour in this room of that being a written exam? Because I don't want to influence. This is your opportunity for your voice. But if we didn't have, you know, how do we differentiate? How do we make component 2 to be more equitable or different as well from component 1? There's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I think that actually that model where they can't touch anything after the 10 hours, do we always, you know, is there does that sometimes constrain things? Does that sometimes constrain the creative process? I think sometimes that particularly if you're using different materials and techniques, it can make it quite difficult for schools if they're doing ceramics. How do they manage to fit in that the time of the 10 hours and then give drying?
I mean, that's interesting because in the old qualification they used to be able
Yes,
to carry on, and that was changed by Ofwat in this.
Yeah. I mean, I could see why that was important, so try and make it as equitable as possible, and that weren't allowed to, and not being able to touch the preparatory work after the first phase. I think it has its benefits, but then at the same time, it feels somehow it kind of is backwards as well, because you would want to work. You might want to then going forward, you think about something after 5 hours, change it, review it, and refine it, which is what you're doing in assessment objective 2. So,
do you feel? I mean, I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate with you here. Do you feel that we're assessing the right things or the same things, or is it repetitive between component 1 and 2? Is there enough sort of that differentiates between the two? Are students getting the time to really enjoy and love art as they should be? Or
I think the whether you want to
put you on
I think when you're talking about the repetition, I'm not sure there is the repetition. I would say that the component 2 is they should learn. It's a real beauty to see, in my opinion, to see students in component 2 be independent, you know, and within the informally supervised time that they're leading the way, that they are telling us where they want to go all the time, you know, and I don't think you are. I think you aren't. You are assessing the same through assessment objectives, but in some ways you're not assessing the same, because what you're doing is you're assessing potentially a different child. A child has learned everything. It's quite a short course, really. If you think about it, it's not 2 years at all. And in some ways, I don't think you are. I think what you would have, maybe there's an issue here if you change things, because if you think about, we assess AO1 here and actually AO2 in inform, you know, in component 2, then what you're doing is you're just kind of destroying the creative process, in my opinion. That the assessment objectives are all linked to each other, and in many ways, that's how artists work. You know,
they're just valuing that creative process. I mean, you know, there's lots to be had, and I really again want to sort of get everybody's insight to see, because you know it has said evolution, not revolution, but also we have got quite a major hurdle to get over, that the volume side. I mean, just as we move on to sort of that assessing the right things, and I will hand back. But, you know, talking about that volume, I'd be interested to understand if, you know, should we be putting a quota out there? You know, this is what your minimum production, or this is what your maximum. You know, I don't have a personal view on this. I really, really don't. And it'd just be really interesting is that one way we could solve the volume? Or do we look at putting lots of exemplars out, and this what minimum looks like? But you know, great boundaries move. They're not, you know, we don't know what they are till later. So you could set that minimum for each level, but also, are we assessing the right things? Could this solve? And I'll hand back over to you. Sort of,
I think sometimes the idea of a minimum is kind of quite useful. I think the kind of maximum could be constraining in the way that students might work, because they may work quite prolifically and quite quickly, and other students then think that maybe I have to do more and more and more to be able to hit the maximum. What is the maximum? Let's all hit the maximum. But the minimum, I think, kind of does give us a kind of potentially a benchmark about what is the expectation. I'd be encouraged to see students being more selective, perchance, and I don't think perhaps that, you know, that always happens, and I think that's partly time related.
And we also want our students to really enjoy art. You know, we want them to be free in year 10 a lot more. Can you talk me through a little bit about what the right things mean to you?
In which way?
Just, you know, assessment, should we be capturing, you know, that creative thinking, that development through process, or should we be looking at the final outcome? Are our methods need to be better evidenced? And decision making, are we really looking at what's the right thing in art and design to assess?
See, the word you use, process, there, I think kind of means two things. Within art and design, it kind of, if something is process driven, it's media driven, as opposed to materials and techniques driven, rather than that kind of ideas. And I think kind of the emphasis, if we move to the emphasis on final outcomes, I kind of feel that we're going backwards to where we were before. That creative journey is so important. The way that we relax, the way that students move through the way that they work, but not necessarily the final outcome. So I think kind of that development through the, we use the word process, that kind of journey of discovery, I think is really important and works very well within the current model.
It'd be really interesting. Again, and this is kind of gathering everybody's insight. So please do continue to sort of share your thoughts in Slido and your questions. Should we be prioritising anything over the other? There's understanding, there's intent, there's communication. I mean, one of the things we've not really touched on here is also, the written element of GCSE. What do we want to be assessing in? What are those right things?
Yeah, kind of the written thing, kind of, so I find it very difficult to weight this because there's a lot of students writing an awful lot and moderators can't read it. Teachers haven't got time sometimes to read it. And why are they writing? Is it really purposeful actually? And sometimes, is that about kind of avoiding the practical? Is it about avoiding creating and making? I'm a visual subject, we're not a written subject. Why are we called the visual arts? Because we visually make things. So I think the kind of, do we need this kind of drawing and annotation that we currently do? I'm not sure we do. Should students be able to confirm what they're doing with the way they write? Yes, possibly, so that they're showing their intentions. But I think the kind of evidence of written work seems to be, in some places has become too much, So.
Yeah. But I guess this all leads back to that volume, that perception.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's talk about relevance in real world. What does that mean in art and design? What should we be assessing? What are the key themes that are coming out that you see in your own school? And
yeah, it's interesting, that kind of heading where it says contemporary and industry practice. Well, our specification has how many titles, and they all have a very different role within art and design. So within an industry practice, between in a sculpture, if you're doing sculpture, it's going to be very differently than that industry practice when you're looking at graphic design or textiles. Kind of when I had a look at these earlier, I kind of wondered whether I felt that this was becoming are we moving to the idea of, scares me a little bit, of a vocational course that, and I really wouldn't want to see that. That a curriculum that should prepare students for modern creative industries. Modern creative industry, also some traditional creative industries linked to the traditional world as well as the modern creative industries.
And I think there's definitely something about that contemporary historical.
Absolutely. I wonder if, at best, we are knowledgeable enough to give our students a kind of range of artists and approaches with a global creative context. But at worst, I don't always see that happening within some of the schools I moderate at, and also within the ways that students want to work, and some of them won't want to work within a broader frame, and that a lot depends on their attainment. I would say.
I think it's quite difficult because what we do know and what has been said is these qualifications are going to last for 10 to 15 years. And you just put in AI, and 10 to 15 years ago we didn't even know what AI is. So and as we said, once the subject content is set, so we need to be ensuring that modern tools and technology that we don't even know that have come out going to come out, that they are tools and they're not influencing. I know you and I spent quite a long time this morning talking about AI and with some teachers, and we had some really, absolutely fabulous conversations. I'm just going to sort of move on quickly about inclusion. That sort of please do.
Just going back to that slide, something that makes me a little bit nervous here is actually about schools being underfunded, and how actually is this going to be able to access every child? How are we funding our schools, and actually are these schools being funded to fit the purpose for this? I'm not sure they are. So that's another bigger, greater question, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we're going to talk about sort of that inclusive, that sort of balance of assessment. And I think we've got to make sure that a qualification can be taught in any school and is accessible to every student.
Everybody.
It's equal for everyone, and you know, so passionate about that. And then we lead back nicely into the inclusion. I'm going to, you know, those. We've said it here, you know, that doesn't matter their background, their resources, their prior attainment.
Yeah.
But we don't want any teacher to be, we want teachers to feel confident that every student that wants to do art can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there shouldn't be any, you know, there's so much within art and design, particularly within the, you know, the current spec we've got as well and the ways of working, that it is accessible to all students. There should be no student. And you know, we had a set of work from a school in Teacher Stand last year, who a student was partially blind, and that work sat alongside the students' work within the Teacher Stand. That we use models to support any kind of diversity and inclusion within their own particular needs.
And I think it's important that we continue to do that, but I think it's important that we can do better.
I think,
and I think, you know, you don't want to, I'm sure nobody in this room, but, you know, if a student comes up to you and says, I want to do art, we've got to be able to support you as teachers, that it doesn't matter, that we'll say yes. You feel confident to be able to say yes to any student.
Yeah.
So they have that sort of accessibility. I mean, diversity, you know, I ran a focus group a couple of years ago about diversity, and somebody actually said to me, that really made me think, because our qualification is so broad and you can do what you want, actually without being prescribed, diversity is getting missed, or students are not necessarily.
Yeah.
But actually, you know, then I talk in other subjects, and there, because we're so prescribed, it's almost things that are happening because of a tick box rather than. And I really, your balance. How do we manage that?
I think you're gonna hopefully balance that depending on your different. I think your teachers have a knowledge base that is relevant for their students. And one of the things that we do have with AQAs, we do have all these documents, support documents. I think ensuring that when we have this fit for purpose for 15 years, we make sure that that we have the support there to be able to support teachers.
Great, thank you. And we're just really going to sort of wrap up a little bit here, because I want to give an opportunity to start looking through everybody's questions. And before we look at this consistency, is there anything else before we move on that I keep putting you on the spot today? I've done this all day to you. Is there anything else that you feel that you want to see the insight, hear the insight, or feel that you're quite passionate about in your own practice?
Well, I think when it says kind of curriculum should ensure a clear coherence into pathways beyond GCSE supporting progression for study to future careers. I know you probably know this anyway. One of my biggest kind of thoughts here is that actually we should have a curriculum that actually really ensures that students are able to show who they are, that we are able to teach our learners, support our learners to be able to be independent and to make selective choices, that we're not holding their hands all the time, that we're not kind of fulfilling an assessment objectives that becomes a tick box, that is a do as opposed to think. And I think it's really important that we have a curriculum that gives those students, really make sure those students have the opportunity to show how their ideas, and that things become personal and meaningful.
Great, thank you. So the last one to sort of confirm what we're at AQA, what we're advocating for. We are absolutely advocating for the retention of 100% non-exam assessment, 100% coursework. We want to evolve. We don't want a big redesign. We've got a great qualification. It just needs some sort of tweaks and fixes. We're 100%. So reducing that workload, that overproduction, prioritise what quality is over quantity, increasing flexibility and evidence. So, do we need that written? Can we have visual? Can we have practical, digital, optional written? Prioritising depth, which I've mentioned, improving our externally set assignments, those timings, that structure, the 10-hour clarity, strengthening inclusivity, accessibility for learners, and improving the clarity of consistency. So that's what AQA are advocating for. If you want me to advocate for anything else, put it in Slido, email me. I was just saying in another session I was running, somebody afterwards emailed me and they absolutely redesigned the whole qualification, all our assessments. Wonderful, thank you. You know, but it doesn't even have to go to that detail. If you just want to say, I'd like to see this, let me know. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Rebecca. Hopefully we've got lots of questions. So let's start off. I wish component 2 was released earlier. At A level, they told us that the proposal was to release the paper at the start of the course. Yeah, I mean, there's no proposal. I mean, what we're looking at is getting your insight. So tell us when you want that paper released. It is an off-call requirement that is released on the 2nd of January, that teachers cannot see that paper before the 2nd of January, which was a change. Yeah, do let us know.
I was thinking about that. Would there ever be a system where all schools have to do within the same period of time?
That absolutely could be a solution.
You know,
I mean, it does happen in music. They have to be assessed in between X month to X month. So it's January to March.
Yeah, so some schools have said to me how it's really hard because of all the resilience checks that they're getting such a short amount of time, and therefore they're looking maybe at having that support.
Yeah. So will the moderation process be altered or removed? I don't know. Again, this will be something we'll see come out. One thing I thought about it, I really need to get a life. I think I was sitting, obviously drinking water at home, and I was thinking, actually, you know, if we examined and marked everything, is that actually going to reduce teacher burden? And then I thought, oh God, if I was to go back to teaching and all of this, would that be great? And then I thought, oh my God, if it was a visit, I'd have to have the examiner come in for weeks, or if I had to do it digitally, I'd have to upload all of this. I don't, and again, we don't know. That's an off-ball. But is that something you'd like to see, or would you like to retain the model that we've got? Or would you like to see balance? Is there a discussion around changing A-level ESE release dates? Absolutely. So again, same as GCSE, those dates are set as the 1st of February. There have been lots and lots of conversations with Ofcom about changing those dates. I think with the upcoming reform, I can't say whether we're going to be able to change it beforehand, but that's out of our hands. Can official rules be made to prevent schools from not giving enough time to art staff? That's a really interesting one. And I wonder if there's something with it that would probably sit more with the JCQ, but I just wonder if those are discussions that we need to be having.
I think some schools definitely, teachers saying if they get no time at all to internally moderate, and other schools are getting 2 days, 3 days off timetable, and actually to have some support document would really, I think, potentially help.
Thank you for all of these. I really like the breakdown of 60/40 and the style of the exam paper, but could the exam paper be released earlier? There's so much pressure. Yeah, absolutely. I was speaking to a school the other day that told me they have 3 weeks to deliver component 2. It's really for A level, which is really scary.
For A level, even worse for A level.
I know. I would really like to see a breakdown of the star. So we've got that. Will component 2 be given more time? And absolutely, I mean that, do we want to see component 2 look completely different? Give me your ideas. How would we like to see it delivered? Will it fix everything if we bring it earlier? Or let's say we influenced and said, right, okay, we want to influence the release of those papers to be September or October. Is that going to fix things? Or do we need to do that as well as something? And this is what I'm, really need to gather your insight. Just keeping an eye on time. We can take a few more. Did the ESE vote report like it did during COVID and mark like one? I think we've got to remember this is a GCSE. I know a lot of people, not the COVID part, liked what happened in COVID, but I also know that a lot of schools said to me students were starting to get a bit bored. And I think some of the perception of the volume has come out of only having one. My own personal opinion is I think we will all continue to see a 2-component model. because it is a GCSE and we want to make sure that we're managing to assess breadth, but it's one to look out for the Ofqual on that one. Did there be a nationally agreed examination date? The amount of work required? Absolutely, there could be, and again, this is what Ofqual could be producing when they do their consultation. And as I say, you know, have a read of that. It might be that you love everything, not one thing. It might be, you might find that you absolutely hate everything, but there could be things like that come up. Absolutely. Yeah. I think we've taken the exam date. Would you consider removing the requirement of drawing? So it's not us that requirement, or we should consider removing the requirement for drawing for photography. But should we consider removing the requirement for drawing across all titles? I don't think we'd see a differentiation between photography, art, and design. But actually, should drawing be there? Full stop.
I think the kind of having to have evidence of drawing and annotation is it's just confusing in some respects, because actually, I think in many ways it's confusing, because actually naturally they'll be there in many ways, and actually lots of photography portfolios will be there anyway. But is it just a hoop we're jumping through that's unnecessary?
Okay, I'm going to very quickly answer the next one, because we are talking about it. So the changes we made purely on the minimum requirement. Nothing else has changed on the course. Absolutely not. If you want to submit 2 projects, but what's really, really key is that they don't have to submit more than 1 project, as they always have as of next year. So hopefully that. Will all endorsements remain? And I love endorsements because it's still old spec. So I suspect they will, but again,
Really
those, that's the
evolution, not revolution.
Yeah, I mean, they would suggest,
hope so.
and we'd see that within the subject content. So it's understanding which of these questions are coming from where.
Yeah.
I think we just take the last one. How could reform improve inclusivity? I don't think I have the answer. I've got lots of ideas, and it needs to, but we need to be working together to really come up with as many solutions and share those with the Department for Education, with Ofqual, but also how we design our specifications and how it's delivered to our students. It's a really full journey. I'm going to take back control because we've only got a little bit of time left. I nearly shared. Bear with me. Okay, quick poll. Are you feeling a little bit more assured about what's happening? How clear are you now on assessment reform and what that can mean for you? So let's have a look. Have we tried? I'm going to hand over to you, Rebecca, to pick that up.
Ask some more questions and I've answered.
I thought, yeah, it's quite interesting. And here we go. Okay, we've moved up a little bit. It's wonderful.
We've gone down on 5.
Yeah, I think it's still, there's still so much.
Yeah.
There's so much of a journey to be had, and this is really starting that journey. And please, please, please carry on talking to us. Come to every one of my sessions, particularly as soon as that subject content has been released, and that draft consultation. You know, we really need to be talking about that continuously. And I think we've proved just now there are probably more questions than there are answers. So have your say. We have our teacher panels, and we work with you with every single one of our products, and we're already working with many of you as we go into these new qualifications. We've made it really easy for you to contribute, have your say, and we'll be running a series of teacher panels where you'll be part of a trusted group. So do please, please, please join our teacher panel. If you've got any suggestions, if you want to have a chat with me about what you'd like to see, obviously anything, my contact details are there. If you contact art@aqa.org.uk, just pop my name, Sandra Allan, in the chat. I'm sounding very croaky. I mean, we've still got a few minutes. So before I say thank you to everybody, is there anything, I don't want to keep doing this. Is there anything else? I mean, I'm just thinking, I'm thinking about that inclusivity question. How, is there any thoughts? I mean, how's inclusivity in your school? Do you overcome any barriers, or?
I think a lot of students' barriers to learn. I mean, when we talk a lot about students' SEND needs, but we don't talk a lot about their barriers to learning in a different ways, about them as personalities or their own physical disabilities in particularly mainstream schools, I think. And, you know, I wonder if that inclusivity is such a, I don't want to say this, it's smaller, isn't it? It's a smaller group of people, and I feel that perhaps, I don't know how, but I know there needs to be a lot of work there.
I agree. So on that note, first of all, huge thank you to join me today, Ali. And you know, your insight and your views have been absolutely vital to make this successful. I want to say thank you to everybody who's attended, but I also want to say a huge thank you and well done. I know some people, I've just looked at the date, some people might still have their moderation to go, but it's been a wonderful 2 years. You've got through it. Go into that summer, have a well-deserved break, continue working with us, continue speaking to me, and thank you very, very much for attending. Good night, everyone. Good night. Good evening. Good night. Good evening, everybody.
Good night for me.
Very much. Thank you.